In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world still felt paused between yesterday's burdens and today's demands, Craig Melvin would sit alone at his kitchen table, the soft glow of a single lamp illuminating the notes he had carried home from the studio. Not just scripts and facts, but the invisible weight of human stories that refused to stay behind the camera. Over the years, he had come to understand something that his colleague, Lester Holt, had once described in an interview as the echo effect, the way certain stories linger long after the broadcast ends, replaying in the quiet spaces of the mind, especially the ones involving loss, injustice, or the fragile resilience of ordinary people. And Craig, now in a stage of life where reflection came more naturally than urgency, felt those echoes more deeply than ever before. It wasn't the headlines themselves that stayed with him, but the faces, the trembling voice of a father, the steady courage of a nurse, the silent strength in a widow's eyes. And though he had mastered the professional composure required to deliver the news with clarity and calm, there were moments, often at home, when the armor gently slipped. That was when Lindsay Charniak would find him, not broken, but thoughtful in a way that spoke of someone carrying more than words. And she understood without needing explanation, having spent years in journalism herself, knowing that the hardest part of the job was not reporting the story, but making peace with it afterward. They had developed their own quiet rituals over time, small but meaningful acts that helped Craig process what he could never say on air. An evening walk where conversation drifted from the serious to the simple, a shared cup of tea where silence was not awkward but healing, or the gentle reassurance of Lindsay's presence, reminding him that he was more than the stories he told. Craig often thought about how Lester Holt had spoken of maintaining empathy without becoming overwhelmed, a delicate balance that required both openness and boundaries. And as Craig moved through his own career, he realized that this balance was not something you achieved once, but something you practiced daily, like a quiet discipline of the heart. Some nights were harder than others, especially when the news mirrored fears he had for his own family or reflected the unpredictability of life that becomes more apparent with age. And on those nights, he would sit a little longer, not trying to solve anything, but simply allowing himself to feel, because he had learned that suppressing emotion only gave it more power later. Lindsay, in her gentle wisdom, never rushed him through these moments, instead offering the kind of companionship that didn't demand answers, only presence. And in that space, Craig found a way to gradually release what he carried, not by forgetting, but by honoring the stories without letting them define him. As the years passed, Craig began to see his role not just as a messenger of events, but as a bridge between the world's hardships and the viewer's understanding. And that realization brought with it a quiet sense of purpose that softened the weight he felt. Because even the most difficult stories, when told with honesty and compassion, could create connection, awareness, and sometimes even change. He also came to appreciate the importance of stepping back, of recognizing that he was allowed to be human in a profession that often demanded unwavering steadiness. And it was in those moments of stepping back, watching the sunrise with Lindsay, sharing laughter over something trivial, or simply sitting in comfortable silence, that he found the resilience to return to the desk each day. The audience, many of whom had lived through their own decades of joy and hardship, seemed to sense this authenticity in him, the quiet understanding that life is not just about enduring difficult moments, but about finding ways to carry them with grace. Craig never claimed to have all the answers, and perhaps that was his greatest strength, because he approached each story not as an expert on pain, but as a witness to it, someone willing to listen, to learn, and to share with dignity. And so, in the stillness of those early mornings, as the world slowly stirred awake, Craig would gather his notes once more, not just the written ones, but the emotional truths he had come to understand. And with a steady breath, he would prepare to step back into the role that connected him to millions, carrying with him the lessons of empathy, resilience, and the quiet support of Lindsay, knowing that beyond the anchor desk, it was these unseen moments of processing, reflecting, and healing that truly defined the man he had become.